The Twins haven't done anything, and we're 1 month away from games in spring training. But what happens if they don't do anything at all? Then what? Let's get Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. Follow me on the skeets at warren.bsky.social. Thank you for joining us for Locked On Twins. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Dave Brown on the tweets at AnswerDaveBrown. What up?
Hi, Brandon. It's is it cold there in Minneapolis? We're getting close to spring training, but that doesn't mean the winter's gone.
So we had a one-day reprieve where it got into the 20s. It is now about 9 degrees as we're recording. It was -3 when I got up at 5 a.m. So we're in the right direction, but it's been really, really cold here. And that goes for not only the weather, but this Twins team and trying to make moves this offseason. So we'll talk about that, or if that doesn't happen here on today's show, which, by the way, is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Yeah, Dave. So before we get to what happens if the Twins just don't do anything, which I don't think is going to happen, but you know, it fooled me once, fooled me twice. You fool me until there's a month left in the offseason. Who's the shame on at this point? So we're going to dedicate an entire episode to, all right, if they do nothing, what does this team look like and where are they headed? And I think it's going to be fun. But first of all, we do want to say, thoughts and prayers to the family of Bobby Cuellar, who was the pitching coach, who is kind of like universally credited with helping Johan Santana learn the changeup that made him so famous, made him so dominant for all those years. Bobby Cuellar passed away recently. He'd worked in the Mariners organization as well. And so, yeah, just thought we would maybe, little tip of the cap to Bobby Cuellar, and rest in peace.
It's funny how, the phrase, it takes a village, to raise somebody, but it takes a village to raise a ball player. Yeah. And you never know where the help is going to come along the way, a lesson or a thought that's going to stick and sort of grab hold of that person's talent. And, that person's going to make the best of themselves, the best version of themselves, or a better version of themselves, thanks to somebody they met along the way. I know, people out there can relate. Maybe there's a teacher or a family member or just a mentor of some kind. And it's, take this time with Bobby Cuellar's passing to maybe think about somebody in your life that helped you get where you are today, wherever that is. And hopefully it's a good place. And remember that person fondly. And maybe if they're still with us, shout at them and tell them how much you love them.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I'm going to do that after we get off the show here, because that sounds great. So no sooner do you and I put together a show about what happens if the Twins don't do something. And we were actually going to record last evening, and then there were some things that popped up and it didn't work out. And in the meantime, good friend Dan Hayes of The Athletic, teaming up with Dennis Lynn, said maybe the Twins are going to keep talking to the Padres about Christian Vasquez. And I feel like maybe you and I had our hands in that a little bit. Like, we started talking about, hey, if you guys don't do anything, then what? And they're like, oh, we'll totally do something now. But no, it's an elephant in the room that I think we should at least acknowledge before we move on to the doom and gloom of, oh, they're not going to do anything.
Well, what we have said is that given the state of the finances, what the poll ads, the current owners wish, and where they are in terms of trying to sell the team, possibly to Ishbia, but still kind of in a state of not even flux, but just kind of waiting to see where the next shoe is going to drop there. Mm-hmm. We said, Derek Falvey, nice trade. To make a nice trade, Falvey, he's going to have to get really creative. And it sounds like he has been working on it with the Padres, which a team coincidentally is going through not exactly the same thing as the Twins, but it's a who's in charge kind of leadership thing, and related to the family, a widow versus sons and daughters, and who's going to be in charge of that team. And if they're a team that is not interested in keeping a lot of salary, then there's pieces that are going to move. They're going to move. It's kind of sad in a way, because you sort of wish baseball was just about baseball and getting a team better and all that stuff. But when you get finances and then family into it, it can be kind of a messy situation. So the Padres might be in a place where they need to move someone like Dylan Cease for longer term assets if they don't want to sign him to an extension. So to say that maybe the Twins can take advantage of this is maybe a little distasteful on some level, but maybe they can.
Yeah, I think you're never supposed to mix business and family, and I think in a lot of ways these baseball ownership groups do that almost exclusively. And so we're seeing that play out with San Diego. And if there's a trade to be made, if two of the parts are Dylan Cease in one direction and Christian Vasquez in another, we don't need to conflate that those pieces really have anything to do with each other. It's just something the Padres could use, something the Twins would like. And there are some people out there making more of a connection than that, which get your clicks, get your whatever. But it would be interesting to see how that all pans out, because obviously Dylan Cease would look really good atop this rotation and would also basically blow the wheels off our theory that they aren't going to do anything. So that's why we got to get this episode out first before they pull the rug out.
Hurry.
We're hustling. And so let's start with the starting lineup. Now, this is where, and I think our good friend Greg Masterson wrote something about this at Twins Daily here the last day or two about how second base is really more in flux than fans might realize. But we've discussed, and I think you and I have, I wouldn't say come to a consensus, but we're comfortable with the idea of that being Brooks Lee if that's what it were to come to, right?
Yes, at least at first. And I've seen some people put out, I would say that it is definitely the right time for him to get a shot. Like, no matter what Falvey does, I think Lee is at a point in his career where he should, unless something like Wallner-esque happens in spring training, and his confidence goes in the crapper. I think Brooks Lee is at a point where the Twins need to start a season with him somewhere on the infield, and he should be in the starting lineup,
or at least could justifiably do so. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the starting nine as I have it. Jeffers, I have Jose Miranda at first base.
Yeah.
Brooks Lee at second, Royce Lewis at third. I know we've talked about Royce to second, and I don't know who plays third in that situation. If it's Miranda, then who plays first? It's a lot of, moving chess pieces. So
the Abbott and Costello routine was much funnier than what you just started to talk about.
Yeah, and that's I'm never going to catch up to that. That's for
not
sure.
That there's an Abbott and Costello on the Twins organization. I didn't mean that. I meant
my
young people out there. That's not
my daughter. Well, my daughter and I were watching the Packers game the other day, and this is a complete aside, but she goes, "Dad, wouldn't it be funny if the team that has the quarterback named Love had a player on there named Valentine too?" And I'm like, pretty sure they do. And I look it up, and I think it's like Carrington Valentine or something. But I'm like, how did the kids? That? Yeah, and then for him to be on that team with a Love and a Valentine, just incredible.
That's a wonderful thought, and I think it bodes well for Harper's intellect that she's thinking kind of like maybe you or I would at that age. I like that.
Well, one of my favorite bits, and I don't know how to sell the joke because I think it'd be good if I could actually put it together right, is how funny is it that the Packers went from a quarterback who hates his brother named Jordan to a quarterback named Jordan Love?
Now you've gone over the line.
Okay. Well, anyway, starting lineup, back at it. Sorry to have derailed us. So I have Correa at short, an outfield of Larnach, Buxton, Wallner, left to right. And then I have Edouard Julien DHing. Now, again, this is subject to change, and I still think, and part of this is I think if they were to trade Vasquez, get a non-roster player from the Padres and enough salary relief to make it work, that money probably goes into someone like Randall Grichuk to fill out so that he would be on here. Like, those are the moving pieces you always have to account for. And what makes exercises like this more exercises in futility than utility. But as things stand now, if they don't add, again, the premise of the episode today, Edouard Julien is my DH. Obviously, you're going to mix and match against lefties and righties and, in and out of second base. But I'm going Jeffers, Miranda, Lee, Lewis, Correa, Larnach, Buxton, Wallner, and Julien at DH. Is there anything you disagree with there?
I wouldn't go so far as to say disagree, but we'll see what Deshaun Kersey does in spring training. You could possibly DH Larnach, put Kersey in the outfield, that kind of thing.
And I didn't mention Willie Castro, which I will on the other side of our first break when that happens.
Right. So, and remember, that is still something that the Twins have going for them, and I maybe put a little asterisk there. They have a roster. Rocco likes to have the interchangeable parts. I know it drives people crazy. I don't care. It's okay. So we keep that in mind as we construct this roster of Twins, as if Falvey is not going to make any more great trades.
The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. I know I want to keep my family's finances all in line. I have 2 younger children. I have a home that I own. I have vehicles. I want to make sure that that's all taken care of. And that's where SelectQuote comes into play, because it's one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. All right, we're back. You're rocking with Locked On Twins. We're talking about what happens if the Twins don't do anything. And again, not that we think that's a foregone conclusion or maybe even that likely. And as soon as we submitted this idea into the universe, the Twins decided to start talking about Christian Vasquez. So maybe we didn't use our power early enough in the offseason, Dave. Have you thought about that?
Well, at least they decided to leak something about it. You know what I mean? It's almost like maybe they heard, I don't know if it's our discourse, but the discourse about how they're not doing anything. And they're like, all right, let's just, leak something. Just something. Throw some red meat at them.
Something.
Lions, stay down.
Innocuous may it be. So, yeah, I did not have Willie Castro listed among my starters, more so that it's hard to find a specific position for him. And again, when you do these off-season activities of like guessing the roster and all that, we want it to fit into such tidy boxes where you've got starters at every position, and then you get to the season and Willie Castro plays 5 different positions in 5 consecutive days, and everything that you've meticulously planned out in your head has gone. So to have Willie on the bench here is not indicative, of how I feel about him, or if I think on any given day he would be, in left field with Larnach DHing and Julien playing second and Brooks Lee sitting. I'm not trying to get into the weeds as far as roles, but more so just making sure we have 26 guys for this.
It's way too early to get into weed, Brandon, because it's January. We're going to need to save that for later in the year when the days get long, okay?
Yeah, no kidding. So the bench I have, and again, the Twins platoon catchers too quite a bit, or at least mix and match. Christian Vasquez, Willie Castro, Austin Martin, and Roster Resource has Michael Hellman. I'm going with Deshaun Kersey. I want a guy who plays center field. Well, actually, no, you know what, though? Willie plays center. You can put Martin out there, too. I'm still taking Kersey because I want to see what I have in him over Hellman at first. But I understand the idea around Hellman, right-handed hitter, a little more positional flexibility, versatility. But again, I don't know how much value that is added when you already have Martin and Willie on your roster. So I'm going Vasquez, Willie, Austin Martin, and Deshaun Kersey on my bench.
Right. Well, this whole concept too of the Twins have done nothing. Generally speaking, I don't know, what was it about this time last year that Santana was added, or was it later? I know he was on time to spring training, but
yeah, I just know when
signed,
it's probably telling that I know when he showed up to spring training, but not when he signed.
right.
So reference says that he signed with the Twins on February 7th. So my wife's birthday. See, I remember my wife's birthday, but that's still almost 2 weeks from now. Is it 2 weeks from now? Yeah, it's almost exactly 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, that would be about a week before reporting day for the pitchers and catchers anyway. So
yeah,
that's right. So I'm just trying to like square up this offseason versus the previous offseason. But I would like to say this too. Aaron Gleeman had a post kind of lamenting about how the last two off seasons have not gone for the Twins like when they signed Correa a couple years ago. It's like, hey, we're having big time stuff here in the off season, and now the last 2 years they haven't done anything. I think like no matter what happens between now and opening day, the team isn't going to be sold. I think generally speaking, the theme of they haven't done anything is more true than not. It's not so much like it's not a literal thing because we know they've added a Rule 5 guy and they added this player here and there and they made the trade for Gasper and all that. It's possible that there might be another Carlos Santana-esque addition here before opening day, but still. So it isn't literally. We're not saying they have literally done nothing or literally will do nothing, but it does appear that for another offseason, they ain't doing nothing, in the figurative sense. So I just think the spirit of what we're talking about is true. And why, again, not to rev up those engines, but it would be nice if the Ishbia talks moved forward and that became a reality, because I think no matter where the Twins roster is for 2025, the long-term health of the team is going to be dependent on what ownership is going to be willing to invest. And the sooner they get here, the better.
Well, what ownership is willing to invest and what ownership it is straight up, like who the ownership group is certainly a factor as well. So yeah, so my bench was Vasquez, Willie, Martin, Kiersey. I feel like yours is probably about the same.
Yeah, I like having Kiersey out there just because sort of in a Brooks Lee Jr. sort of way, it's kind of time for him to show what he can do.
Yeah, was he 27, I think?
Yeah, he's if he isn't 27, he's going to be by the time spring training starts. So he's, an old rookie. And, we're not talking about baseball cards or a Hall of Fame, investing in baseball cards or a Hall of Fame possibility here for Kiersey. That's not what it is. So the fact that he's a little bit older, it's not ideal if you're talking about, well, this guy's going to be great for the next 10 years. But he is in a position to be a helpful asset to the team. And I hate that I use that word asset, but a helpful guy for the team in the next couple of years based on the ground that he can cover in center field and his ability to hit from both sides of the plate and not be a detriment at one. So I think the Twins want him to make the roster on opening day. I think that's true. Whether it turns out to be what happens, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, and I think, I kind of conflated or got myself twisted into a logic pretzel about center field. If you have somebody that can play it really, really well, and that frees you up to use those other guys in other ways, that's even more beneficial. It's not that Austin Martin can play center. It's that if you could have him play somewhere else and you needed to use him, that would be preferable. I don't know. That's probably pretty close to the case with Willie. I mean, I can't pick one place where I'm like, yeah, I want Willie there every day. He's just kind of does what he's supposed to do wherever he goes.
Well, we liked Willie seemed to be at his best with the Twins when he didn't have to be used the same place every day. So when he's able to, and we kind of thought that last year, or I did, maybe you agreed that he got overexposed a little bit, maybe fatigued. You look at his numbers before he was an all-star. He was good enough to make the all-star team. Second half, not good enough to make the all-star team. So, and not even close, and not really even a guy that you wanted in a lineup necessarily, as it turned out. The Twins are going to want to have, presumably, if there are no great trades, Falvey, they're going to want to have Willie Castro available to them and the best version of himself in September. So having him able to be on the roster without having to squeeze every last drop out of him, I think is going to be ideal. And two, you mentioned like, well, is Kersey going to make the team, or is Willie going to, where's Willie going to play? Willie can play second base. Austin Martin does have that capability of playing the infield as well. So I don't know if that is going to matter as far, he's probably ahead of Kersey on the pecking order, Martin as well. And that's a guy that you could put on the infield. But also with Royce Lewis taking reps at second, maybe you don't need that guy like Martin that can play center field and second base, another guy like that. So that's another thing to consider.
When you were saying Willie's name, it struck me that I feel like he's probably the most likely to talk in third person, like Ricky Henderson on this team. Willie Castro's got to do what Willie Castro's got to do. And I think it might be because it's such like a compact name, like Chuck Carr. Chucky's got to do this. Chucky's got to do that. I think it works. I think I could hear Willie going, Willie's got to stop swinging at that first pitch, man, when he storms off the field or something like that.
Well, there's something I think everybody rolls their eyes when somebody talks in the third person, but I mean, look at some of the people that do it. Bo Jackson, Ricky Henderson, like you said, it's a little bit of an ego thing, but to have that kind of ego and confidence in baseball is not the worst thing in the world. So maybe you roll your eyes a little bit, but I think partly a little of us wants that person to talk like they're in the third person. So, it's I think there's an upside to it.
All right, let's take our last break. When we come back, we're going to talk pitching and maybe some extra bench stuff and just see where we think this Twins team measures up if they don't do anything. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. And one of my favorite memories was attending a concert just this last year. The energy and excitement were unforgettable at US Bank Stadium when I saw Metallica, Mammoth open for them. It was incredible. Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming Timberwolves game using the Gametime app. With Gametime Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before I bought. Plus, the super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, we're rolling down the home stretch here. Locked On Twins, Brandon Moore and Dave Brown. Dave, I had kind of like my position players around the opening day roster, the kind of guys I think could maybe like sneak into that conversation. Mickey Gasper, obviously, I think a lot hinges there if they trade Vasquez. And I kind of surmised last night not last night, but once this news about Vasquez came up, that they could turn to Gasper to back up to start the season, especially if they were banking on playing Jeffers quite a bit. And then by the time you deem Diego Cartaya ready to come up and maybe be your backup catcher, some things changed there. Cartaya has one option year left. So as much as I kind of teetered on AA, AAA for him, I think I agree with the idea that it's probably got to be AAA with 1 foot, one bag packed. Well, not really packed to go over to Minneapolis, but one eye looking to the west towards Minneapolis. And so I think they could patch it together with Gasper early, Cartaya whenever he shows to be ready, in which case he's kind of on my fringe. He can play elsewhere too. Mike Ford, I still don't really think he's that much of a factor, but it's hard to ignore when he's one of the few things they've done. And then Junior Severino, one thing we didn't bring up with Zips that I had noticed after the fact with Dan Zimborski was that his defensive value on Zips was off the charts. It was like 7 runs or something. And so I wondered if, maybe he's an option at first base. I really don't know if there's some kind of glitch in the matrix, because I'm not sure how you would say that Junior Severino, a guy who was taken off the 40 and had to re-sign a minor league deal, would be that kind of defensive value anywhere. But those are my three guys where it's like, they could sneak in there too from internally.
Well, I sort of wish we could like phone a friend at this point and ask Theo Tollefson if Severino on the eye test is any good at first base. I was thinking about your catching conundrum, and I see Gasper is too similar to Ryan Jeffers to be like the backup to Ryan Jeffers. So it almost, I just kind of wonder, I don't know, if he is not just also AAA depth, and in case Jeffers gets hurt, kind of a depth. I see they want like maybe a defensive oriented person behind Jeffers, and we assume that's going to be Vasquez. But if it's not, I'm just kind of thinking out loud there.
Yeah, and would they really take the route from crazy stability to a starter you're not sure you trust and a backup you're pretty sure you don't trust? I mean, I don't see the Twins really taking that risk. And then wherein someone like Yasmani Grandal comes back into the picture, just again from an experience standpoint, I don't know. And those questions will answer themselves in fairly short order once and if Vasquez gets moved. I wish I had the answer, and I wish I could pretend that I knew what was a likely or even semi-likely answer. But, just don't have that. But, yeah, Gasper, Ford, Severino, kind of the three guys. Hellman, obviously, in that conversation since he's on the 40. But, again, for the position players, I don't think there's that much, fluidity outside of if someone like Luke Keeschel just crushed it in the spring and somehow forced his way onto the roster. But again, they have a full 40 right now. If they trade Vasquez, like I said, for a non-roster prospect from the Padres, cash, whatever, they would have one open spot, which I could see going to a right-handed hitting outfielder. And that could theoretically be it for the offseason. Like, again, I know they're talking about Cease and all that, but that would be a really underwhelming offseason from a moves quantity standpoint. Quality, I guess whatever. But when I look at that, I don't see that much room for change in this offense, even if they make a move or two. I think what you see is pretty much what you get.
I mean, there might be some reshuffling of the chairs if Vasquez goes, because it's a $10 million deal. Right. And of course, it depends on how much the exit team is willing to take. So, you're right. That's one reason why. I don't know. I kind of feel the same way about the pitching staff too. I think that, and it's good. I mean, they're basically set with what they have. I think one thing that is going to be a factor is how tempting is it going to be for Zebby and for Festa if they light it up in spring training. And I think it's possible. It's harder to do that in the Cactus League than it is in the Grapefruit League, just because of the nature of, it's like every place is Coors Field out there. But if they get off to really hot starts and sort of pivot from Festa had a pretty good rookie season. Zebby gave up some home runs, but if they're at their best, that is really going to push the Twins to think about, well, what do we do here at the end of the rotation? Are we putting these guys back on AAA? Is it, should they be part of the bullpen at least to start the season? What should we do? So I think that's where the fluidity, I think that the offensive side, the player position side, you're right. But I think there is a little bit more fluidity as far as what they can do just because of the kinds of prospects that they have on the pitching side.
Well, and so that's actually a pretty good transition to the other side, which is pitching, and we'll have to be a little quicker with it, but it's kind of the nature.
Well, don't quick pitch because then they'll throw at your head.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so the 5-man rotation, we already know via Rocco Baldelli's Inside Twins appearance that Pablo Lopez will start on opening day. I have Pablo, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, Simeon Woods, Richardson, and then Paddock / Festa. I guess if you keep Paddock, he's got to be in that spot. Then I would definitely be willing to debate SWR against Festa. I think SWR gets the nod just because he was, he took the ball so often and just kind of established himself in that manner, whereas Festa was a little later in the year. So it's not that I'm less excited about Festa, but I think SWR has a little bit more of that, like, belonging vibe just because of how many starts he's made.
Right.
But with that said, if they trade Paddock, you're either maybe trying to still get another starter, or you could go Pablo Joe Ober, SWR Festa, Zebi obviously would be in that mix. But as far as this 5, like, this is a good 5. I'd love to see it become a great 5 with either Dylan Cease or whoever else they could trade for. But they've got a pretty good 5, 6, 7, 8 in place here. We don't have to deviate from that, even if we're upset that they haven't done anything. That's still a dang good starting rotation and adjacent pieces.
There are a couple things that I think we're kind of acting like it's 100%, and I don't know that we should.
Right.
Now, we haven't heard anything like any kind of delay or any kind of residual effect with Joe Ryan, but he ended the season hurt.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
And it just because of the nature of the position, it wouldn't surprise me if, I don't want to use the word setback, but if he was a little slower than,
timeline, timeline.
Yes. So that's something there. Paddock, people have talked about maybe putting him in the bullpen, and maybe that would be a place for him long term. But I think they also look at him as somebody to move in a trade, and I don't know that moving him to the bullpen or acting like we're going to move him to the bullpen, I don't know if that helps his value as far as that goes. Probably so they're going to want to hide that a little bit if that's true. So I think those are two, in addition to the X factors of the kids. And I'm also assuming, going back to SWR, that he is going to he didn't end the season great, but the end of the season pretty good. If he regresses at all, or, kind of goes back to a little bit of a square one just because he's still young, I'm not saying he needs more time in AAA, like a whole season, but maybe he might need a few new starts. It's a few starts down there. So I just, as we remember from last year, while the pitching was still a strength, it wasn't exactly what it was in 2023. And little things like what I've mentioned so far could pop up and kind of throw your plans askew.
Yeah, I'd say SWR isn't written in pen, and he's not written in pencil. He's written in one of those goofy erasable pens you'd get at the book fair for 99 cents back in the day.
Maybe the erasable pencil, like in a mechanical pencil, it's kind of hard to erase.
Yeah.
That's still there when you try to erase it, which is why they tell you to use number 2.
Yeah.
Kids, use your number 2 pencils. Listen to your teachers.
Yeah, that's who number 2 works for. So we got the rotation pretty well mapped out. The bullpen also fairly well mapped out. Now, your locks / gimmies are Duran, Jax, Sands, Stewart, Alcala. Tonkin, probably just because they took him to arbitration or rather tendered him a contract. I mean, they could still cut him, but I think if he gets to the end of the spring and he's pitched reasonably well, he's on this bullpen, right?
Yes. But I mean, that's a Tonkin, God love him. That's a guy who, if things go wrong in spring training, they're not gonna give him the benefit.
True, but at the same time, Paul Sewald just got $7 million, and there's no guarantee he's going to outpitch Michael Tonkin. I mean, people wondering why the Twins brought Tonkin back. Now you realize, holy smokes, there are some very good relievers getting crazy great reliever money, or whatever the trickle down is. That Sewald is a perfectly fine reliever, depending on which version of him you get.
Right.
But if I'm paying $7 million, I really don't want a reliever who may or may not be good. I mean, so from that standpoint, Tonkin is still a pretty good bet to me to be on the team on opening day. Again, if everything blows up on him in spring training, all bets are off. But if you concede that those, was that 6? 6. That means you have 2 spots open. You would probably like to earmark one for Aberson Castellano, the Rule 5 pick. And that's what Roster Resource did. And then they have Cody Funderburk, which you and I have kind of battled about that. Do they need a lefty in the pen? I bring Louis Varland along for the ride and say, forget that lefty. We don't need someone just because they throw left-handed. I would rather have Louis Varland commit to the bit of throwing 98 and just seeing what his potential is out there. Because if he gets even close to where we've seen him at his best, Duran, Jax, Sands, Stewart, and Varland, that's like a 5-man dream, better than any Twins bullpen I can remember in my lifetime.
I agree 100% that, if he pitches, if just talking about Louis, if he pitches well in spring training, he should be in the bullpen. But of course, some of this, they talk about Louis like, we're gonna give the starter thing at least one more spring training. It's not they sort of put the jacks to the rotation stuff to bed, but left the door open for Louis. And I think some of that has to do with, well, how does Joe Ryan do in spring training, and where is Simeon Wood Richardson in his progression, and Paddock, is Paddock looking like a guy with a 5 ERA or a 4 ERA?
Well, just very quickly, sorry to interrupt. It also is like, if your last two are Simeon Woods Richardson and Festa, and you trade Paddock, suddenly you have two young guys that are question marks, and then everyone else, Zebby might be great, he might be terrible, and so your tent poles, your pillars disappear very quickly if you aren't careful. And that, having Varland as someone who's been in that spot before, even if you only think he's going to be a number 5 starter with a 5 ERA, 1.8 homers per 9, lots of strikeouts, lots of walks, some kind of like Trevor May as a starter, workhorse looking guy, that is not something that we as fans think of as like setting the world on fire, but teams have value in that. They would rather have Louis Varland make 10 stinky starts than Zebby Matthews or anyone like that who's that far early in their career where it could be detrimental. If Louis stinks in the rotation for 10 more starts, whatever, you move him to the pen, you say that we're done with this, he's a reliever now, not much changes. But if you need to kind of grind through some starts while you're getting some of these guys ready, I think that's where the value of Louis staying stretched out comes from. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think that's what the organization is thinking.
And I want to get this in too. I look at Brock Stewart as much more, I mentioned Joe Ryan timeline. You really have, it is a box of chocolates. You have no idea where you're going to get with Brock.
Did you say a box of chocolates?
Not on purpose. That would have made it funnier though.
Oh man.
But all right, no, we're going to get into Kauffman Stadium here. We can't see that. But what was my point? Oh, yeah. So you don't know about timeline for him. So things are fluid there. And I have always loved the idea of bringing in guys like Festa and Zebby to pitch in the bullpen as rookies. I think if they are, I don't really necessarily think there's that much value anymore in them wasting ammo, if you will, in AAA starts. If they have great stuff, I like the idea of them getting their feet wet in the bullpen to start their careers. I don't know if the Twins are in that might be a luxurious thing, although pitching depth does seem like definitely to be one thing that they have. So maybe that could happen. That's two
names. Sorry, two names I wouldn't forget about too that'll also possibly factor in is Matt Cantorino and Connor Prelip. I mean, we're not talking about those guys as having any chance of breaking the rotation maybe at any point this year, but like the writing is on the wall for both of them. Cantorino's entire career hangs in the balance, and if a move to the bullpen can save what is an electric arm, they would certainly do that. And Prelip, if he can't stay healthy as a starter, I'm not saying that it's easier to stay healthy as a reliever if you're going up there throwing 98 from the left side, but at least you use up your talent in the big leagues as a reliever as opposed to maybe making the big leagues as a back end starter. There's a lot of names to kick around here, and I think that's part of why, Varland will make probably 3 starts in Grapefruit League play before they really know what they're going to do, and maybe more.
And, getting back to Louis again, I think that's another reason why the Twins can feel comfortable giving him one more chance at the rotation. Because I think we're pretty sure, I mean, they certainly would give him a chance in the bullpen if it came down to that. He was very useful in several instances down the stretch last year. Actually, when lots of other people were, not playing well, Louis Varland played really well in September. But those other guys, Prelip and Cantorino, those are also guys that maybe the Twins are going to be able to count on in the bullpen at some point this year. So I think their depth has depth in as far as hard throwing relief pitcher possibilities. So that's why you can continue to placate Louis Varland's starter wish.
And I think I too might even prefer Brent Hedrick as a left-handed reliever to Funderburg. I mean, not that I have anything,
you had asked about that question. Do they need a lefty? It would be nice,
but not
but
necessary.
is the lefty any good? But it's also easier for us to say that. We're not the manager. Rocco might still feel like I gotta have at least one out there. No matter what Cole Sands does against lefties and so forth, and you can make up for it. There's a mental aspect of it that if we don't have one lefty in the bullpen, I really don't have any options out there. So on some level, so I think that's something that he's got to think about too.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll see what happens there. All told, Dan Zimborski said that the team as presently constructed looked like about an 85 to 88 win team to him. If you put a gun to my head right now, and please don't do that, I'd say like 87 wins right now, which again, I think based on talent alone, this team could be in the 90s. I also bake into the fact that I always feel like they disappoint me more than I expect. And also they still haven't done anything at all. So I can't be that optimistic. I still think though, there's no reason this team is not in the thick of it in the AL Central if they don't completely poop the bed like they did last year.
You would think that given the talent that is on the roster and given the disappointment of last year and the ability to bounce back from that disappointment, which is basically isn't because, except for Joe, it's not it wasn't health issues, but it was just bad play issues for the most part of the roster, that they should be able to get kind of near 90 wins with what they have. So, to me, I don't think that the AL Central is going to have quite as good of a season as it did last year. I see the Guardians coming back to earth a little bit, although maybe the White Sox will win 10 more games. Oh boy. Maybe 5 of them against the Twins. Who knows? But I 87, 88 wins seems like a good spot for the Twins at the moment.
And there's nothing wrong with that if it was not under the cloud of you could easily spend more, you could easily do this, you could easily do that. So, and we'll actually probably have more on that in a future episode here coming up, because I know Derek Falvey did try to claim things were business as usual. I think Aaron Gleeman's article flies in the face of that directly, like a stiff wind in the opposite direction. But we can talk about that. And then maybe some thoughts on Rocco Baldelli's appearance on Inside Twins. So we got a few things coming down the river bend here before spring training. And who knows, maybe a roster move or two will drop besides. But until then, he's Dave Brown. I'm Brandon Warren, saying thank you so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Twins, and we'll see ya
tomorrow night.